Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today we are going to share scary urban legends horror stories. First story, Valentine's Day urban legend. I should have known by the doe eyes and the shy smile. Jess was a pretty girl, a little nerdy and a little pudgy, but still cute. She had long dark hair, dark brown eyes, tan skin, and the biggest crush on me of any girl I had ever encountered. I should have stayed away from her, but when a guy wants what he wants, it is hard not to go along with it, especially when you just broke up with your ex-girlfriend of 2 years. I had hit a bit of a dry spell the last few months. Becky and I had been dating for 2 years, and she was like the hottest girl in school. I stupidly broke up with her 2 weeks before her 16th birthday. It wasn't smart, I know, but I couldn't take it anymore. We had started out hot and heavy our freshman year of high school. She was popular because she was hot. I was only popular because I was on the football team and she was a cheerleader. Yeah, I know what you were thinking. How cliché, right? It was true, though. We were that couple. She was tall like me and had blonde hair that went down her back. She had the hottest body, too. You're probably wondering why I would break up with such a hot girl. To be honest, it was because she began to smother me. It started out with constant text messaging. "Hi, Jacob, baby. Sit by me in English class." I'd text her back and tell her something like okay. Then she'd send me some emoji with a kiss face or something. At first it was flattering because every guy in school, even seniors, wanted to bang Becky, but she only had eyes for me. As time wore on, though, so did my patience. She started insisting on doing everything with me, and if I didn't text her right back, even in the middle of the night, she would pick these stupid fights with me. She was constantly threatening to break up with me if I didn't get in line. So, I did it for her to disastrous results. It was a week before her 16th birthday, and she had this huge pool party planned just before our junior year of high school. Her parents had hired a band, rented out one of those video game trucks, and even had it catered. We got into one of our classic fights, and I snapped. I broke it off with her 5 days before the party. She was devastated, to say the least, but I didn't care. I just wanted to put Becky behind me and move on to greener pastures. That is when the night of the birthday party, which everyone I knew was attending, I chose to hang out just outside of the house in the street where a bunch of kids were congregating. I didn't have the nerve to go into the party. Some of the seniors were going to Lookout Point, which was a name we gave this local hangout spot that overlooked these cliffs that lead into the Atlantic Ocean. Our town had nothing going for it really except tourism in our small Maine town. So that is when I started to notice how other girls looked at me. Other girls being Jess Maccabee. She was so cute that night with her tank top, short shorts, and her hair all down her back in waves like a mermaid. I thought she was so cute the way she looked at me with her big almond-shaped eyes and her heart-shaped face. We were sitting in this area with a bunch of pine trees and lit a fire out of some old tree branches, creating our own sort of campsite. As we sat around that night drinking beers and I was flirting up a storm with Jess, they started telling scary stories and old urban legends. One being the Valentine's Day urban legend. Dan, the oldest of our group, started asking us if we had heard it. We shook our heads in unison and I smirked because I knew Dan and his crazy stories. He was that guy that you knew was going to grow up selling tinfoil hats to talk to aliens. He had a conspiracy story for everything. It was funny to listen to all his suspicions about the government and how aliens lived underground. This would be no different. Well, there was this girl who had been jilted by her lover. So she went to this gypsy, which to get a love spell. The spell was 3 nights before a full moon. You had to get a red stick candle for love and write the name of the person you loved. You had to melt the candle down till it was pliable, and then you had to form it into a doll of the person, adding hair, fingernails, bodily fluids, whatever you had of that person. Rumor has it she only had a black candle. So she did what she could, writing the name of the guy she loved in it, turning him into a little doll. In the original spell, you had to bury it for 3 days, then on the 3rd day, dig it up and leave it out under the full moon. Then some spirit would grant your desire, using the full moon's energy. Only because she used a black candle, which represents death, her lover died, getting his head chopped off. She killed herself after he died, and when they found her, she had that doll in her hand with tape wrapped around the doll's neck. They found her on Valentine's Day. We all busted into hysterical laughter. It was typical of Dan, always telling us stupid stories. I didn't think much of it after that, and I noticed it had begun to get chilly out, and so I offered to share my blanket with Jess. One thing led to another, and we had sex that night in the back seat of my Toyota. When we finished, I took her home with the promise of calling her the next day. A promise I had not intended to keep, but when I woke up the next day to go to my job at Lowe's, I found her jacket in the back seat. I should have given it to someone the next day to give to her, but me being a stupid asshole I am, I texted her. I think I said something like, "Hey, beautiful, I have your jacket. Maybe I can bring it by later?" I got a quick text back from her, "Oh, thanks so much. I want you to know how much last night meant to me. I have liked you for a while, and it was magical." I cringed and sent her a text back, glad to be of service. It was lame, but it was the best I could come up with given the circumstances. I promised to drop off her jacket after I got off work that evening. So as the day wore on, I got a series of texts from everyone I knew telling me about how great Becky's party was the night before. I could have kicked myself because it looked like it was a kick-ass party. It was a never-ending day, and it was slow, and hardly any customers came in to shop most of the day, so my boss let me off work a little early. I texted Jess as soon as I got out of work, hoping to deliver the jacket and be on my way to the rest of my life. I got a text back from her saying she was home, I could bring it any time. When I got to Jess's house, her family was having this barbecue, and talk about awkward. Her dad greeted me at the door. "You must be Jacob. Jess has told us so much about you." I cringed, but I smiled politely. "So you want to stay for dinner?" I didn't, but I was hungry, and barbecue was enticing, I have to say. The smell of the burgers and charcoal were haunting my taste buds even from the street when I had gotten out of my car. When I walked into the house, I was greeted by an older version of Jess. She looked exactly like her mom. Her mom looked young, 42 maybe at the most. She was smoking hot too. I couldn't help staring at her breasts as he shook my hand. "Jess has told us so much about you and how you met. Come and Jacob, take a seat at the patio table. We're just getting ready for dinner. I hope you like hot dogs and burgers." "Oh my God, Mom," said Jess, rolling her eyes at her mom and looking at me. She was still cute, I had to admit it. Even cuter when she got embarrassed. Maybe I could keep this up for one more day. I ate with her family that night, and then I found myself asking her if she wanted to go somewhere and talk, which was guy code for sex. She willingly went, and we drove back to Lookout Point and did the deed again in the back seat of my car. Tacky, I know, but where else were we supposed to go? I decided I kind of liked Jess, but I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going at this pace. I felt like I was using her a bit, and it made me feel shitty about myself. I decided that for now, I would just see how it would go. It went all right, following me with her doe eyes right into my first day of algebra class. It was awkward to say the least because it had been 3 weeks since we had started sleeping together, and none of my close friends knew, which meant Becky didn't know either. I kind of wanted to keep it that way for now. That first day of class, Becky came over to me and sat down next to me with this sexy grin. I had forgotten how hot she was, and I quickly found myself forgetting about Jess. I forgot she was sitting in the back of the class watching everything Becky and I were doing and saying, "I was such a dumbass. If I could take it back now, I would, but I can't, so there it is. You live, you learn, as they say. I can't believe I am saying this to you, Jacob, but I kind of miss you. I just wish you and I could work things out and go back to the way they were. I feel bad now and realize how stupid I was too. Forgive me and have lunch with me?" she asked with her pretty smile. I wanted to, but then I felt eyes glaring at me from behind my head. "I don't know, Becky. There are some things I need to take care of first." She looked puzzled, but I knew what I meant. I had to tell Jess I was getting back together with Becky. I sent Jess a quick text. "Jess, can we talk after class? Is it about Becky?" She had texted me so quickly, but it was obvious, wasn't it? "Yeah, I guess." "Okay." So after class, I met her by the locker room, and when I looked at her eyes, I knew then I was in deep shit. She was so damn cute. "Becky wants to get back together." "Well, how does it make you feel?" "I don't know, Jess. I like you too." I meant every word. She kissed me, and that was that. I forgot Becky, and I began a relationship with Jess. Nothing is that simple, though. I didn't tell anyone I was dating Jess. I hid it from everyone, and it wasn't that there was anything I was ashamed of. I guess I just felt protective of her. If that meant I liked her then, I guess I did. I was so confused. Fate had other plans for me, though 3 months of dating in secret had taken its toll on her. And whenever she wanted to tell people, I always told her I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. Then she got pregnant. Jess had no intentions of being a mom at 16, so she went to a clinic and I drove her. After that, things were different between myself and Jess. She wasn't the same sweet person she was before, and eventually I broke it off with her and got back with Becky. A week or so later, I was coming into school on a Monday, and that is when I started to see everyone crying in the front of the school. I parked my car and walked up to Becky, who looked horrified. "What is going on?" I asked. "You didn't see the news?" "No, why?" "Jess Maccabee killed herself over the weekend." I gulped hard and felt like the wind had just been knocked out of me. "What the fuck?" "Yeah, they said her parents found her slouched over her bed after having stabbed herself multiple times in the stomach. She was always a weird girl," said one of Becky's friends, Tracy, that up until this moment I didn't even realize was standing there. "Yeah, they found a weird wax doll in her hand wearing the same exact outfit she had on, with a giant pin in the stomach of it." "What? Are you joking?" I had asked. "No, I wish we were. How sad for her parents, but how creepy is that?" I just stood in a daze, unsure of what to do. There was a funeral a few days later, which I reluctantly attended. I didn't even bother to say anything to Jess's parents. I just went to my car alone and silently wept. I kept feeling like maybe it was my fault for breaking up with her. If I could have brought her back, I would have, but alas, that wasn't possible. That was only the beginning of this weird nightmare. About a month later or so, I was running late for football practice when I remembered I forgot my spikes in my locker. When I went to retrieve them, there was a small 4x4 jewelry box that fell out of the locker with a red ribbon around it. I thought maybe it was a gift from Becky, so I opened it. I smiled as I took the ribbon off. Typical Becky, giving me surprise gifts in my locker. She was the queen of gifts. She was always dropping candy or little lunch bags in there because she knew my combination. When I opened the box, I knew Becky was not the giver of this gift. It was a box with a bloody liver or something in it and a weird piece of red wax melted on it. I assumed it was chicken liver or something, but what I read gave me chills. "Be my bloody Valentine." I dropped the box to the floor, and then I noticed something else. It was a tiny piece of paper. When I opened it up, it was a line of prose as though someone was trying to get my attention. "Valentine's Day is exactly 5 months away. Don't be a square and promise you will be there in the back of your car. It was how it began. Why couldn't you just be a man? Now she is dead and you wish it was all in your head. Go to the spot where you were a lot. You will find another gift there from me to you. Why do you look so blue? Turn that frown upside down. Jess is there now, hoping you will not disappoint her." I dropped my football spikes and ran to the back seat of my car. The back of my car had another box, and at this time it was bigger than the small one. I wondered if I should go to the cops, but my curiosity was stronger, and I opened the back seat of my car. The box had a red ribbon tied around it as well. I took a deep breath and opened the box. Second story. An urban legend follows me wherever I go. My name is Ryoko. I grew up in a rural village in Japan, and I later moved out and traveled to Sweden when I was 18 for a university bursary. The village was located around the north side of Tottori. I lived with sister and mom. I had a few friends around the neighborhood. We loved exploring around the village since it was mostly just plain farmland, but it was beautiful. There was a shrine built at both ends of the village. On the far left side of the village, I lived around 2 houses away from the shrine. Next to the shrine, there was a small shack, and inside was a place for offerings, alongside materials used for rituals. We would do our rituals very different than the rest of Japan. Typically, you did 2 bows, 2 claps, and a bow. In our village, we would gather a white cloth or towel, dirt that has been blessed by a Shinto, a silver scissor, and lastly water that has also been blessed by a Shinto. We would hang the white cloth or towel on 2 wooden bamboo poles. Place a bowl of blessed dirt on a stone slab in front of the towel, and pour half of the blessed water into the dirt. Then gently place both hands into the bowl, covering your hands lightly in the mud. We would then wash our hands with the remaining water over the cloth, essentially dirtying the cloth, while symbolically washing away the evil and transferring it onto the cloth. We would then snip the cloth with the silver scissor, destroying the evil. We would then stand up, bow 4 times, followed by 2 claps and a very deep bow. We would do these rituals every month in order to ward off the evil spirits in our village. There was an urban legend of a woman. Her name was Hinura Ikamori. She was in her mid-20s. She lived exactly in the middle of the village. It was around the time of the month where people would start to complete rituals, but that year, Hinura did not complete her ritual. In fact, she did not do it at all. At the last hour of the month, it was rumored that the people heard loud shrieks at the core of the village. The next morning, people found Hinura's eyes ripped out of her pale corpse. Hinura had a white blindfold wrapped around where her eyes should have been. The blindfold was made out of the clean, white cloth usually used during rituals. Her bedroom was covered in blood. It was said that hours later, her body was not found anywhere. Ever since there has been an urban legend of Hinura. It's said that if you do not complete your ritual before the end of the ritual month, you will find a woman in a white dress, wriggling around, almost dancing with a blindfold on in the middle of a distant field. It's said that if she stops dancing and looks at you, you have one more night to live before she steals your eyes and wears them as her own. But if she takes her blindfold off, you will be curses for the rest of your life and be doomed to have the most torturous life possible until you complete the ritual. But Hinura would make it very difficult for that to happen. I thought that the urban legend was created so that people would complete their rituals. When I turned 13, I decided that I would see if this was true. I was very confident that it was all a hoax. The last night of the month, I didn't do the ritual. At exactly midnight, I felt a presence watching over me. I decided to leave my lamp on that night, but it didn't help. Eventually, I managed to sleep. That night, I had a very vivid dream. It almost felt real. I was in front of the shack used for offerings. It was covered in sealed chains that I had to reach into a pot to grab the keys and break the seal. I entered the shack and closed the door behind me. I bowed down to the shrine, and after that, the doors started to rattle, and the door handle would repeatedly be pushed down until it suddenly stopped. Blood leaked through the bottom of the door before I turned around. There was a pair of eyes aiding on the table on the shrine. The shack started to shake before the door burst open, revealing a tall woman in a white dress, before I woke up in a cold sweat. It was early afternoon when I woke up. That afternoon, I met my friends outside. We went out of the village to go exploring again. After about an hour, I noticed a woman standing in the middle of a field near a mountain. She appeared to be wriggling around. I grabbed my friend's binoculars and looked at the woman dancing around. Her arms were flailing like a flag waving with the wind. She twisted and turned, but not like a human. Her torso twisted right around until she stopped dancing. She was looking right at me. I asked my friends if they saw her too, and they couldn't see anything. She pointed at me as her other hand removed her blindfold to reveal an empty eye socket with blood leaking from them. I told my friends to run as I ran back the village. I told my parents what happened. They immediately sent me to my room and covered the windows and walls with blessed papers. They commanded me not to open my room to anybody. Later that night, somebody knocked at my door, followed by vigorous attempts at opening my door. I fell asleep again shortly after that. The next morning, I was told to complete the ritual, which I did. During the ritual, I spontaneously forgot to complete the ritual with a deep bow. From then on, I would be haunted by Hinura every night for years. I was told to leave Japan several years later for a bursary. I felt relieved that I may be cured of the horrid nightmares I had each night. I moved to Sweden. For months, life seemed to be okay, until about 3 months later. I woke up at 3 in the morning. I looked outside my window and found Hinura dancing. I immediately looked away at her, praying to myself. I could feel her. I went to sleep after that, having a dream. She was standing in my bed, staring at me with her blindfold off, but I couldn't move. That week I went to a Shinto, They commanded me to return to my village and complete the ritual, and once I did that, I'd have to live to the village's Shinto for 3 weeks before I can return to Sweden. So I did just that. I returned to Japan, and I completed the ritual. I was surrounded by a bowl of Shinto blessed salt, and Kay completed the ritual. It was not easy, though. I heard whispering while in the process of the ritual, followed by tapping, pushing, and the feeling of a presence surrounding me. After that, I loved with the Shinto for 3 weeks before I returned to Sweden. I visited the Shinto in Sweden, and he advised me to bless my house and surround every room and the house in salt for 78 days, which I did. After that, life seemed to have went back to normal. I've been having normal dreams. I've been energized and happy for the last year, until yesterday. I had a dream I was back at the shrine. It was daytime at that time, though. I saw myself as a 13-year-old completing the ritual. Unlike when I was actually 13, I saw Hanura standing in front of the shrine. Haldi G, the scissor used to cut the cloth. When I was about to cut the cloth, she held the scissor under her blindfold. When I snipped the cloth, she snipped the blindfold. When the blindfold fell from her face, she had beautiful, light brown hazel eyes glimmering in the sunlight. She vanished, and I woke up. I felt calm when I woke up. I don't know if by chance that means she will take my eyes or she found hers, but I need somebody to tell me whether that's bad or good. Third story. My local urban legend is real. Creaking through the night, bones hang loose and free. There was a broken man, a boy who could not see, hiding in the daylight, hiding in the trees. Do not try to run from him. The boy who could not see. If a sound that you make finds his eager ears, listen for the tiptoe and stifle all your fears. He slithers down the halls, bones hang loose and free. He's coming for your eyes, the boy who could not see. As a child growing up in my hometown, it wasn't strange to hear this rhyme being constantly uttered by the kids in school. Specifically, it always seemed to be directed at me. I was born premature. Due to that, I was also born blind. And growing up in a town in which the local urban legend was an eyeless freak proved to be difficult. It wasn't strange for me to come home caked in mud and blood. Adults and parents, including my own, seemed to turn the other way when it came to situations like this. Sometimes it made me wonder who was actually blind. It didn't take me long to figure out that they could, in fact, see this, they just didn't care. If I had to describe my town in one word, it would be conservative, almost cult-like in the way they handle things. When I was born, it was already decided that I was born cursed, that whatever I had done in my past life had led to this punishment. Every conversation was laced with hate or pity, and being less than 5 years old, I never understood why. It was only when I was enrolled into school that I first understood. It was when I first heard that rhyme. It was when I first heard a child yell, "She's a blind freak," like the guy in the song, followed by exaggerated and high-pitched screaming and giggling from the other kids. By my second day, I was ostracized and left behind at any chance. For the first 11 years of my life, I had no friends. The week after I turned 11, I met him. It seemed like a normal, miserable day. I sat alone at recess. The week before, on my birthday, I'd been gifted an MP3 by my parents. I used it every day since to listen to music while I sat alone. I was drifting off to the sound of my music when I felt something graze my shoulder. Flinching, I spoke up. "Hello." Even I could hear the visible fear coating my voice. It was clear that I was expecting a beating from hostile classmates. Instead, I was hit by a wave of unfamiliar comfort. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. You look sad, so I wanted to say hello." I relaxed at the unfamiliar voice of a boy floating into my ears. His voice was melodic and sweet. I smiled. "Yeah, I'm okay. I don't think I've heard your voice before. Are you new?" He was silent for a moment. "Not quite. I just never saw you before." Another silence filled the warm air surrounding us. It lasted a beat too long. "You're blind, right?" I was hesitant to answer honestly, but it should have already been pretty obvious. I replied with a quick, reluctant yes. There was another moment of silence before I heard his voice speak out again. "You know the bell already rung, right? The other kids are already inside. For the first time in a while, I stopped to listen again. He was right. I couldn't hear any sounds of laughter or play coming from anywhere nearby. I must have had my music too loud to notice the bell ring. Hey, how about we go play instead? Follow my voice. I heard quick footsteps retreat as he called out again. Follow my voice. Try catch me. Hesitant about ditching, but in need of an adventure, I decided to play. I can't recall any moment in my life in which I'd had more fun than that. We laughed as I chased him, following his voice as he led me through a forest of trees for who knows how long. After we had both gotten tired, I heard him call out from somewhere high up, I guess the treetop. You didn't catch me. That's a shame. Do you want to try again tonight? Tonight? My parents would never dash. Don't tell them. He cut me off. He sounded strange, almost angry. That should have been my first warning. I was intimidated not only by his change in tone, but also by the thought that I might have just made my only friend mad. My thoughts were interrupted again by his sing-song voice. The forest looks very pretty. I bet it does. Do you want to see it? Of course, at least I wish I could. I smiled up at where I thought he was. I can show you. This caught me off guard. What do you mean? I questioned. I heard something hit the ground with a thud. The sound of bones breaking filled the silent forest. What was that? Are you okay? Fearing the worst, I called out again. I said. His sweet, soft voice had a tinge of hostility in it now, and was followed by a slow clicking noise as I heard uneven dragging and footsteps approaching me. I took a step back. Would you like me to show you? I felt something wet brush my cheek, and the feeling lingered. I backed up as the sound of cracking and dripping inched closer to me. My back hit something hard, and I cursed the fact that we were in a forest. I felt his ragged breath hit my face, and the sound of cracking as a small soft hand cupped my cheek. I doubt I'll forget that sensation. Something sharp caressed my cheek. I can give you my eyes, but in return I need new ones. Will you help me find new ones? I swore loudly and pushed him off me. I turned to run, but a calloused hand that seemed to have a few fingers too many caught me. Frantic, I spun around to pry his hand off me when I heard a sudden screech come from him as something hard swung into my face with a swift crack. Listen to me when I speak. Behave, and I'll give you a taste. The creaking grew louder, and the pain in my face throbbed. It was swollen and hot, and I could feel and smell the blood trickling out of my nose. A hand pressed itself against my cheek and fondled my wounds. I'm sorry. I'll make it better. A jolt of pain filled my face and body, but subsided as fast as it had appeared. It felt like a thick claw being poked into my swollen cheek. Suddenly, I was thrust into a world I'd never seen before. Unfamiliarity flooded into my eyes. I could see. A creature stood over me, neck craning and head tilted. It had eyes that seemed more like windows than anything. They were empty, and they gave me a feeling I don't know how to describe as anything less than fear and pity. The thing towering over me was unnaturally bent, as if every bone in his body was either hyperextended past human limits or broken and unattached. He lowered himself toward my face. I averted my newly found gaze and directed my eyes to the ground. Small bodies littered the ground at his feet. They were children, maybe only 5 or 6 years old. Each one stared up to the treetops with blank expressions. Blood pooled out of their eyeless sockets. My vision faded again, and I was landed softly into unsettling familiarity again. I started to sob. Fear made it hard to do anything else. How was that? He asked it in the same tone as when I first met him, innocent and sweet. I didn't respond. All I could manage was to shake my head. Anxiety knotted my stomach, and I felt bile rise to my throat. Fear clawed its way out of my head, and it pounded with my heartbeat. Don't be ungrateful. Answer me. It wasn't the same soothing voice, but a rough yet still oddly calm voice. The kind of voice that a mother might scold her child with. I don't know if it was foolishness or fear, but I yelled out, tears streaming down my cheeks. What do you want from me? You will see soon. I will show you. A hard fist swung into my face with another hard crack as dread welled up inside me. I felt myself lose consciousness this time as I hit the ground with a thud. When I came to, I could feel the rough grass underneath me. It tickled my neck as I propped myself up. Surrounding me, I heard mumbling from around me and the sound of my mother crying. Footsteps approached me. "Hey, buddy." I recognized the voice as our local police chief. "What's happened?" I was disoriented to say the least. He helped me up as I tried my best to explain what had happened. I must have sounded crazy. I rambled about the bodies lying on the floor, but was dismissed, saying that I was alone when they found me. The police chief shook his head and turned back to talk to my parents. I had apparently been missing for 10 hours. After all the legal business had been done, I was taken back home and given a stern talking to about skipping school. I could barely pay attention. That night I didn't sleep. How was I supposed to with everything that had happened that morning? How was I supposed to when I could hear the tapping on my window and the creaking that managed its way into my room? How was I supposed when I could make out the clear rasping and hot, uneven breath that lingered on top of me as I tried to fall asleep? In the morning, I heard it creak open my window as it left with the dragging of its feet. As I got older, I learned what the imagination of a child could do. I'm 23 now. I've made peace with the way I was raised, and as soon as I left my home, I found a job. I even rented an apartment that I would be able to afford on my own. Still no friends, but things were better. I was happier. I hadn't thought about that incident in so long. I had chalked it up to the mind of a child, something I'd made up as an excuse or an escape. Everything was behind me. That was until last night. Last night, I woke up to the sound of uneven dragging sliding across my wooden floor. I woke up to the smell of death permeating my room. Every creak of my floorboard was accompanied by a soft, sweet humming. Suddenly, I felt like a child again. The same primal fear flooded into my stomach. It only worsened when I had felt something sharp begin to caress my cheek. I felt every breath as he continued to hum to me. I heard him say something I hoped never to hear. It was a barely audible whisper. "I'm ready for you now." In the morning, he retreated. I felt him get on all fours and slide under my bed. I hesitated to get out of bed. That morning, I ignored how every step I made was followed by the sound of dragging, mirroring my every move near perfectly. The sounds retreated back under my bed as soon as I got to my front door. I didn't go to work today. Instead, I'm holed up in a local motel. It won't take long for it to find me again, and I pray I survive this. But just in case, I wanted to tell someone about why I'm not around. I'll be in touch again if I make it out of this. Fourth story. The Legend of the Mogollon Monster, before my encounter. Like many boys, I attended Cub Scouts. The youth program gave me many fond memories such as camping, hiking, swimming, but most of all, campfire stories. My father would attend these camping trips and always had the same story to tell. The Mogollon Monster, pronounced Mogion. The Mogollon Monster was popular at Boy Scout camp, as the Mogollon Rim was only a few miles from the campsite. So by namesake alone, we were well within its territory. The Mogollon Monster was an Arizonan urban legend. It was supposed to resemble the notorious Bigfoot, only with monstrously huge eyes. Most accounts claim that it towers at a massive 8 feet tall, with eyes the size of grapefruits that glow an ominous red. The creature was supposedly nocturnal and prefers to decapitate its prey. According to legend, it will come to you if you whistle at night in its territory. All this can be found on Wikipedia. But it's not the monster itself that I am writing about, rather the story that isn't told on Wikipedia or any other book, anthology, or internet forum that I have been able to find. According to the story, sometime during the early 1900s, a family lived on a farm somewhere along the Mogollon Rim. If I remember correctly, they were cattle farmers. As cattle farmers, the entire family pitched in to help. In these parts of Arizona, it isn't uncommon for people to own several acres of land, so the more hands to help, the better. This family had a gated segment for their cattle to roam. The children would help wrangle and herd the cattle, as I can only assume cattle farmers do. I think that they either sold some of their property or that they got new neighbors because a new fence was being posted along the perimeter of their land. At the far end of the fence was a flagpole with a huge American flag. Both neighbors were patriots, so neither complained. Now Arizona gets most of its rainfall between late summer and early fall. This is called monsoon season. As a kid, it was my favorite time of the year. Arizona is known for its brutal heat, so heavy rain is a bright contrast to its devastatingly high temperatures. You can say, oh, but it's a dry heat, all you want, but spend a summer in Arizona, and you will be just as thrilled about the monsoons as I was. While I may have enjoyed the monsoon season, I feel like it would cause trouble for cattle farmers. In this story, that is the case. The rolling clouds of thunder frightened the cattle herd, and one particularly mischievous cow found its way outside of the gate. Not wanting the cow to escape for good, the father of the family started to get dressed in rain clothes to go outside and reunite the lost cow with its own kind. Before the father could finish, his eldest son, whom we shall call Jeremiah, told his father to not worry about it. As the eldest son, Jeremiah was always trying to prove his independence. His father, whom we shall call Jacob, took pride in the capabilities of his son, so he did not dispute the generosity despite it getting dark outside. Jacob could hear whistles and clicks from his son as Jeremiah tried getting the stubborn cow back to where it belonged. Jeremiah must have been outside for almost half an hour. By then it was completely dark out. Jacob heard his son scream. This was the first time Jeremiah had screamed like this since he was a little child. Fearing that Jeremiah must have tripped and broken an ankle, or even worse, gotten bit by a rattlesnake, Jacob immediately ran outside to find the source of the commotion. Much to Jacob's astonishment, he saw a hulking figure running off with Jeremiah draped over its shoulders, still screaming madly. Jacob could hear the monster mimic or maybe even mock the boy's pleas for help. Thinking quickly, Jacob ran back inside to grab a shotgun. He told the rest of his family to stay put before running back outside in the direction of the monster. Jacob ran as fast as his feet would take him, hoping beyond hope that his son was still okay. However, the boy's screams had abruptly stopped. Jacob's heart sank, but he wasn't going to give up that easily on his eldest son. He continued onward until he found fresh footprints in the ground. They were man-shaped, but dwarfed Jacob's feet in comparison. He followed these footprints for several hundred feet until they seemed to have disappeared. Jacob looked up from the ground and found himself face to face with yet another monster. This monster was rail-thin with large bulbous head. It stood even taller than the other monster, but not by much. Without thinking, Jacob shot the thing twice in the head. Jacob could see a splash of gore, but still the monster stood its ground, not in the slightest fazed. Knowing he wouldn't be able to defeat this beast, Jacob turned back and ran to the rest of his family. Now you might be thinking that Jacob's act of returning home was cowardly, but he had a family to protect, and there were multiple hellish creatures roaming his farm. He couldn't risk losing his wife and daughters along with his eldest son, so he gathered his remaining family together, and they spent the rest of the night in the same room. None of them slept that night. When dawn finally emerged, Jacob armed his family and told them to stay indoors. He traced the steps he made the following night until he came face to face with the slender monster. The monster wasn't a monster at all. It was Jeremiah's head shoved onto a 9-foot flagpole. His face was a mess of splattered flesh from the shotgun blasts, but it was just barely intact enough for Jacob to recognize the remnants of his son. Now I know you might be calling bullshit on this. I can't find any records of it happening, but I do have somewhat of an experience with the thing. This is just an introduction. I have seen the Mogollon Monster, but I will save that story for another day. Fifth story. The neighborhood's urban legend. Clayton Willows was my childhood neighborhood's urban legend. He rarely left his home, and when he did, he was only greeted by murmuring of those who saw him. Mr. Clayton's wife and only son had died during a fire in their home over in Ohio several years prior, and he slipped into a deep depression that soon turned him into a reclusive man. I hear he killed his son and then raped his wife. is the one phrase that Mrs. Salinda, the most disrespectful person in the area, would constantly shout out when the topic came up. Everyone knew that wasn't the case. The kids in the neighborhood, however, were more entertained by the stories and scared of the man those get stories were about. But the stories are for another time. It was during the summer in the late 80s when my baseball broke his window and sent all of the other kids running. I was the only one who stood in the road staring at the green tinted house. It wasn't in bad shape to be owned by someone who rarely shows their face outside. And even during the winter, the driveway would be shoveled clear of snow by morning. Of course, my parents, along with all of the other parents in the neighborhood, would spread gossip about Mr. Clayton. Despite everything that I had heard over the years, I walked up to the door and knocked. At first there was no response, so I knocked again. This time, there was the sound of rustling and something heavy tapping on the floor in a steady rhythm. Eventually, the door opened, and there stood Mr. Clayton, baseball in hand. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Willows. I promise I didn't mean to break your window." I started shooting out excuses for why it happened with no real outcome seeming possible. I guess I expected him to grab me and toss me into some torture room, or for him to stab me to death like he did in all of the stories my friends had told me. But what happened next I hadn't expected. Mr. Clayton held the baseball out to me, and I took it nervously from his hand. He smiled at me and poked his head out through the door into the sunlight. His graying brown hair looking as if he had just woken up. He had to shield his eyes from the sunlight and looked back at me for a second. "Where are your friends, little one?" He said the words and smiled at me, waiting for an answer. "They are off." I replied with a greater deal of stuttering than I care to elaborate on. "They are scared of me, aren't they?" He looked at his feet with a look of pure defeat as he spoke. "I suppose I would be too with all those stories floating around out there." I stayed quiet. He stepped out onto the porch in front of me. "What's your name?" "Mike," I said reluctantly, and I made sure to leave off my last name. "Well, Michael, are you scared of me?" he asked, scratching his head. I thought about it for a second. This man wasn't all that scary as a matter of fact. He was pretty nice. Why was everyone so mean to him was a mystery to me at the time. "No, sir," I said after a few seconds. Good. That makes one person who knows that I'm not some crazy person." He laughed when he finished his sentence and started to walk back inside. "Mr. Willows, I broke your window. Aren't you going to tell my parents?" I asked without thinking. He turned and looked at me before smiling. "It's been a long time since someone was willing to have a conversation with me. I'll fix the window as long as you promise it won't happen again." "Yes, sir. I promise." He smiled and walked back inside, closing his door behind him. I stared at the door for a minute before I heard someone behind me. "Psst, Mikey, get out of there." I turned to see a few of my friends standing in the road motioning for me to run. I walked up of the porch and joined them as we returned to my house. When we got there, they began asking all kinds of questions about Mr. Clayton. Did he have the scar from his wife cutting him with a knife? Jay asked. "Screw the scar." "Did he have the red eyes, Mike?" Ryan asked. "No. Guys, he was just a normal old man." "I don't get why everyone is saying this stuff." I responded, but somehow in their eyes I had become the bravest kid in town. That night I couldn't help but still feel guilty about his window. I had broken a window before and knew that it would cost a lot of money to repair. I decided that the next day I would go see Mr. Clayton and see if I could help him with anything. I walked up the porch steps and knocked on the door. After a few minutes, the door opened, and once more there stood Mr. Clayton. He smiled when he saw me. "Michael, what are you doing here?" he asked. "Mr. Willows, I know you said I'm not in trouble, but I think I should at least help you with something to repay you for the window." I said, trying to be responsible like my parents kept telling me to be. "I don't have anything that I need help with," he said after apparently thinking for a short period. "Well, can I at least keep you company then?" I said immediately. "I know you don't have many visitors, and I thought maybe we can be friends." "Friends?" He rubbed his chin and looked at the sky. "It's been a long time since I had a friend." I waited patiently for an answer. "All right then, friend. Come on in," he said, walking into his house and leaving the door open. I hesitantly walked inside, and closed the door behind me. The house was very clean and well organized. He had a massive bookshelf against the wall across from the door, and a table beside it was covered in pictures of his wife and son. I followed him into the living rooms. There was a picture of him holding his son and his wife with her arms around his neck. Smiling, all smiling. He walked up next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "That's the love of my life, Rachel, and my son, Jimmy," he said after a short silence. They were my best friends. I looked up at him and saw him wipe his eyes. He looked back down at me. "What happened?" I asked without thinking and quickly tried to take back the question, realizing what I had asked. I lost them in a fire when we lived in Ohio. I tried to go back in and save them, but she was stuck under a bunch of wood. She handed me Jimmy and told me to get out. Jimmy stayed alive until we got outside, and then he was gone too. He looked away into another room and then down at me. "Do you want a drink? I have Coca-Cola and Sprite." "Coke," I said, and he walked into the kitchen, leaving me alone in his living room. When he came back, he was holding 2 cups and sat down on the couch. He started telling me stories about World War II and talking about how he used to work in the construction business. And we talked for the rest of the day. Eventually, visits to see Mr. Clayton became a daily thing. Even during the school year, I would drop by and say hi. He became one of them best friends. At the end of my senior year, he even came to my graduation. In 2003, I decided to move away from the neighborhood entirely. Mr. Clayton even gave me some money to start paying for my new apartment. I stayed in contact with him, and he continued telling me stories about his childhood, family, and the world. On December 23rd, 2007, I got a call from someone named Patricia Helms. She told me that Mr. Clayton had passed away and that my name was on his will. She asked if I could come to the old neighborhood and discuss the conditions and legal requirements to fulfill his final wishes. I got back to the neighborhood at 8:45 a.m. almost 2 days after the call. Patricia met me outside of the Mr. Clayton's old home, and we went inside of the still clean house to discuss things. After a few hours, she left handing me an envelope and telling me the house and everything in it was mine. I had never really walked around in the house before, so I figured now was the time to. I walked into the living room and put the note on the coffee table. I went into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator and found something that had me a flashback to that day in the summer when I first met Mr. Clayton. I pulled out a Coca-Cola bottle and got a cup and poured a drink. I stood looking out the window at the field next to the home where we used to play baseball and realized this was the window that the ball had broken. I continued staring out the window for a few minutes and then walked down the hallway and into one of the bedrooms. I felt strange as I walked into the room. It was full of pictures of his wife and son. There were even VHS tapes scattered around with their names and dates on them. I returned to the living room and picked up the envelope. I opened it and read the letter. Towards the end, he told me thank you for everything and signed his name. The next week, I left my hotel early and started to clean out the house. I started with his office room, and when I was going through the papers, I found it. A piece of paper that I took into the living room where the lighting was better. A newspaper article about a house that caught fire with a title that scares me. Man burns family. Under it, a picture of Mr. Clayton holding Jimmy and Rachel's arms around his neck. 6th story. Urban legend. The girl on the security camera. I'm not new to the internet, nor am I new to Reddit or any other social media. I just tend to visit, read, then go about my day. I learned in the earlier days of being online to never engage in fights online. But I do spend the majority of my time looking things up and doing lots of reading. Much of that reading isn't spent on anything supernatural. But now I'm at a loss. I'm currently working security in Center City. That's downtown Philly for people wondering. The reason I'm posting here now is that I've encountered an event that's kind of left me shook. I can't tell you exactly where this occurred because I still work there, and the last thing I need is a bunch of urban explorers coming to this place at night. Then I'd have to chase you all off, and ain't nobody got time for that. Anyway, I've looked online, and I can't find anything related to what I'm looking into. So, I'll just tell the story, and maybe you can come up with something. A few nights ago, I showed up to one of the many construction sites downtown to relieve my friend and take over for the night. My normal night duties are to check in with him, see what he has to report, which is usually nothing. Then we walk the grounds for a few minutes, and then I go to the security room to start checking the cameras. In today's world, a lot of the cameras are motion sensitive and require little monitoring, except to see things in the distance and zoom in on what may or may not be trouble. I am armed, just in case I have to scare off someone or hold them until the police arrive. But with Rona scaring the smart folks, only the idiots come out at night to places like this to explore or skateboard or something silly like that. So, on this particular night, after my friend left, I began to make my rounds and check things out. I went down to one of the lower levels, and I noticed an odd set of bricks sitting in the middle of the floor. At first, I wasn't going to worry about it, because this site was under reconstruction. But the bricks didn't match any of the bricks or mortar the construction crews were using. They were more like those red bricks down by the old city. There were about 4 of them, spaced evenly, 2 bricks on the ground, and another brick atop the other. Thinking they were just keepsakes or whatever from the crew, I left them there and continued my rounds. It was about 2 hours or so later when I got the chime of one of the security cameras. I put my phone down and looked up at the camera. This girl was walking about the site with her hands in her pockets. I was going to get on the horn to tell her this place was off limits and dangerous and that she needed to go home. But instead, I just watched her. She was walking with purpose, like she knew exactly where she was going and was in absolutely no hurry. I zoomed in closer to get a good look. She was a black girl, pretty with brownish skin, and kind of looked like old girl from Black Panther, Nakia. Lupita Nyong'o, that chick. It looked kind of like she was whistling something. She was wearing some biker shorts and a t-shirt, and looked like she wasn't carrying anything I could see. She went right to the bricks on the level I had been on earlier. She didn't approach them right away. She just stood there for a moment, like she was examining them. Her head was tilting sideways, while she rubbed her chin. She then reached into the side pocket of her shorts and pulled out what looked like a phone. She took some pictures, walked to the side of the building, and jumped off. I hit the alarm immediately and began to dial 911 as I rushed to the site of where she jumped. As I explained to the police what happened, I ran to the site to look over the ledge to see where she'd fallen to. Jumping from this side of the site led to a straight plummet about 3 stories high. She might not have died, but she damn sure broke something. But when I got there wasn't a body. There was no blood or anything. She was just gone. I could hear the sirens, so I headed back to the booth, and that's when I noticed that there were now 8 more bricks on the pile. I'd come back later to check on that, but for now, the cops were here. Without a body to show them, they had thought maybe I had fallen asleep and thought I'd seen something. But then I remembered the cameras. I rewound the feed and watched the recording, and sure enough, there she was. The cops saw the video. They saw the girl. They saw her jump. They took a copy and told me to report anything like that to them, if she came back, or anyone else did. I watched the video hard for the rest of the night. I ain't afraid to admit I was shook. That ain't some shit you see all the time. I had forgotten about the bricks until the next day. So over the course of the next few nights, I watched as the series of bricks continued to grow. I had no idea how they were appearing. And since there were only 3 of us working these shifts, we each took turns recording the amount that would appear and let the others know. My friend told me that he and the other coworker tried to push and kick them over. They didn't budge. Neither of them had seen the girl, and since the construction was halted for a few days, we knew it wasn't the workers doing it. So on the night, something did happen. I mean, man, it was crazy. I was looking up ancient bricks and ghost bricks, all type of damn bricks online to see if there was anything I could find. Maybe this place was on a burial ground or something. But one site I found had a great way of explaining the thing about burial grounds and hauntings. The whole world is a burial ground. Things have been dying since they've been living. The whole world is haunted. So that wasn't it. So I just watched the bricks again while I searched. That's when I noticed it looked like it was forming some type of arch. As they stacked themselves, they looked like they were growing into a door or something. I was tempted to call the cops again, but the bricks building themselves were never recorded. Just the movement of people ever causes the alarm. So I got the idea to look up supernatural arches and a bunch of YouTube clips about doors and passages to the other side came up. Then I realized that some crazy shit from someplace else was trying to build a door here, and it was almost finished. It had maybe 8 to 10 more bricks to go. I went to them and looked for something I could use to stop whatever the hell it was from coming over. Look, I'm an atheist, still am, but I don't know everything. I didn't know I had to stop those bricks from forming that arch. No tool I used worked, so I decided to put something between both sides to stop them from completing the arch. I took some rebar and put it in place and hoped that would be enough. I looked up the construction company's number and left a message at their emergency number. It was late, so I didn't expect anyone to show up. I just hoped the rebar would last until more. That's when I realized my up. I just completed the arch. And try to stop it, I completed the damn thing. I sat down in my chair shaking. I just watched the camera feed as I realized what I did. I was too scared to leave since I would have to walk right by that place. I took out my gun and checked the ammo. I wasn't sure what good it would be against something that could build a door from another dimension, but I had no doubt I was now on the front line. I drank my soda as my body shook, and I watched the camera, hoping nothing would happen until morning. Maybe they could blow the floor out from underneath it or something. Then I noticed the girl was back. The alert chimed. She was back again and walking normally, still whistling. This time she had on a pair of workout gloves, biker shorts, and a tight-fitting tee, and an expensive-looking pair of kicks. I watched as she approached the bricks and looked them over. She took the rebar and knocked it out of the place I had it. You cannot believe the relief I had when she did that. I had no idea who she was or why she was so into that damn thing, but I didn't feel like peeing my pants anymore. But that wasn't the end of it. She patted the bricks and then began to pace around them and do stretches and shit. Like she was getting ready for something. She knew something was going down. But what? How was she going to stop whatever was about to happen? She had no weapons and no offense. She was maybe 5'8", 5'9", about $160. I mean, she was in shape, but I think I could have taken her easy. Then for the first time on camera, bricks appeared and continued to form the arch. As she backed away, I noticed her smile a bit. She moved away from the arch in a straight line, counting her paces. Then she knelt in the stance as runners do when they race. She didn't move for like 30 minutes. Her head down, and she held the running position as the bricks began to close the arch. I cocked the gun without thinking, but I was still too scared to move. Sorry, ladies, but she was on her own. I had a feeling manning up was going to get me dead real quick. Sweat was pouring down my face as the last brick appeared and clicked into place. I held my breath as I watched her, her head still down, and then I switched to the arch. Something was happening. The bricks did a 180, and something black began to form in the center. When I say black, I mean black. It was so black it was like it swallowed the light in the immediate area, and still she didn't move. Her head was still down. Then something, I don't know, man, some old freaky shit, some Lovecraft, Edgar Allan, horror shit started coming out of the arch. I swear I wanted to turn my head, and honestly, I don't know why I'm not insane. Must be what she did to me later. But anyway, a thing like a man mixed with a bat, made of black and gray jello with an elephant face, stepped from the arch, and it noticed her. Legit, it saw her. Then homie just stopped. Whatever looked like it was in the midst of growling or yawning like a newborn, and it just stopped. Her head popped up, and I swear her eyes were on fire. Not flames coming out, but like the light fire makes. Then her skins, the veins beneath were like lava flows. Then she smiled again. I'm not even gonna lie. Demon dude scared the shit out of me. But the look in her eyes, the smile she made, and the way homie just stopped moving had me feeling bad for it. She ran at dude so quick, quick. She jumped up in a dude's face. He was at least good 7 or 8 feet tall, and her hand was glowing, and she just mugged old boy. Took him down. She smashed its head into the ground so hard I felt it in the booth. It looked like it tried to fight back, or at least it wanted to, but she sizzled its arm off. Then she took a wing. The stench was so bad. It was like burning rubber and fresh dog shit. It screamed a scream I never want to hear ever again in eternity. Ever. She stood up and looked at it, then at the arch. It mouthed something at her, but its face was so mangled and burned. but she didn't kill it. She took her finger as it tried to back away. So I just watched the bricks again while I searched. That's when I noticed it looked like it was forming some type of arch. As they stacked themselves, they looked like they were growing into a door or something. I was tempted to call the cops again, but the bricks building themselves were never recorded. Just the movement of people ever causes the alarm. So I got the idea to look up supernatural arches, and a bunch of YouTube clips about doors and passages to the other side came up. Then I realized that some crazy shit from someplace else was trying to build a door here, and it was almost finished. It had maybe 8 to 10 more bricks to go. I went to them and looked for something I could use to stop whatever the hell it was from coming over. Look, I'm an atheist, still am, but I don't know everything. I didn't know I had to stop those bricks from forming that arch. No tool I used worked, so I decided to put something between both sides to stop them from completing the arch. I took some rebar and put it in place and hoped that would be enough. I looked up the construction company's number and left a message at their emergency number. It was late, so I didn't expect anyone to show up. I just hoped the rebar would last until more. That's when I realized my up. I just completed the arch. In trying to stop it, I completed the damn thing. I sat down in my chair shaking. I just watched the camera feed as I realized what I did. I was too scared to leave since I would have to walk right by that place. I took out my gun and checked the ammo. I wasn't sure what good it would be against something that could build a door from another dimension. But I had no doubt I was now on the front line. I drank my soda as my body shook, and I watched the camera, hoping nothing would happen until morning. Maybe they could blow the floor out from underneath it or something. Then I noticed the girl was back. The alert chimed. She was back again and walking normally, still whistling. This time she had on a pair of workout gloves, biker shorts, and a tight-fitting tee, and an expensive-looking pair of kicks. I watched as she approached the bricks and looked them over. She took the rebar and knocked it out of the place I had it. You cannot believe the relief I had when she did that. I had no idea who she was or why she was so into that damn thing. But I didn't feel like peeing my pants anymore. But that wasn't the end of it. She patted the bricks and then began to pace around them and do stretches and shit. Like she was getting ready for something. She knew something was going down. But what? How was she going to stop whatever was about to happen? She had no weapons and no offense. She was maybe 5'8", 5'9", about $160. I mean, she was in shape, but I think I could have taken her easy. Then for the first time, on camera, bricks appeared and continued to form the arch. As she backed away, I noticed her smile a bit. She moved away from the arch in a straight line, counting her paces. Then she knelt in the stances runners do when they race. Yo, she didn't move for like 30 minutes. Her head down, and she held the running position as the bricks began to close the arch. I cocked the gun without thinking. But I was still too scared to move. Sorry, ladies. But she was on her own. I had a feeling manning up was going to get me dead real quick. Sweat was pouring down my face as the last brick appeared and clicked into place. I held my breath as I watched her, her head still down, and then I switched to the arch. Something was happening. The bricks did a 180, and something black began to form in the center. When I say black, I mean black. It was so black it was like it swallowed the light in the immediate area, and still she didn't move. Her head was still down. Then something, I don't know, man, some old freaky shit, some Lovecraft, Edgar Allan, horror shit started coming out of the arch. I swear I wanted to turn my head, and honestly, I don't know why I'm not insane. Must be what she did to me later. But anyway, a thing like a man, mixed with a bat, made of black and gray jello with an elephant face, stepped from the arch, and it noticed her. Legit, it saw her, then homie just stopped. Whatever looked like it was in the midst of growling or yawning like a newborn, and it just stopped. Her head popped up, and I swear her eyes were on fire. Not flames coming out, but like the light fire makes. Then her skins, the veins beneath were like lava flows. Then she smiled again. I'm not even gonna lie. Demon dude scared the shit out of me. But the look in her eyes, the smile she made, and the way homie just stopped moving had me feeling bad for it. She ran at dude so quick. She jumped up into dude's face. He was at least good 7 or 8 feet tall, and her hand was glowing, and she just mugged old boy. Took him down. She smashed its head into the ground so hard I felt it in the booth. It looked like it tried to fight back, or at least it wanted to, but she sizzled its arm off. Then she took a wing. The stench was so bad. It was like burning rubber and fresh dog shit. It screamed a scream I never want to hear ever again in eternity. I mean ever. She stood up and looked at it, then at the arch. It mouthed something at her, but its face was so mangled and burned. But she didn't kill it. She took her finger as it tried to back away. Seventh story. The Red Elevator. Every college/university has their own urban legend, and they all seem to be pretty similar. Even in Bangkok, Thailand, where I had studied, we heard about a slightly different version of Bloody Mary. However, the university I studied in did have its own unique urban legend, which is tied to a true historical event, and I thought it would be cool to share it here. I will not share the name of the university, though, but you could easily do a quick Google search, and I'm sure you would find it. Back in 1876, there was an attack by Thai state forces and far-right paramilitaries on student protesters on the campus. The protests were due to students from various universities around Thailand being displeased with the return of former military dictator to Thailand from Singapore. Just before dawn on October 6th, the attack on the student protesters began and continued until noon. To this day, the number of casualties remains in dispute between the Thai government and survivors of the massacre. According to the government, 46 died in the killings, with 167 wounded and 3,000 arrested. Many survivors claim that the death toll was well over 100. Many students attempted to escape by cramming themselves into a single elevator and stopping it in between floors in order to avoid the shootings. One elevator was not so lucky because as students were frantically trying to get in and get the door closed, the military had reached them and opened fire before they could. It was literally shooting fish in a barrel. After the ordeal was over and reparations were being made, that particular elevator had red stains from the blood of all the students. The university decided the only way they could take care of those stains cost-effectively was to paint the whole elevator red. Now imagine being in that elevator all alone, knowing what had happened, trying to differentiate between the blood stains and the paint color. As the legend goes, your elevator would get stuck in between floors, and sounds of gunshots and screams of the dying students would fill the elevator. You would be faced with the spirits of students and would have no way of escape. With Thai people wholeheartedly believing in spirits, no student ever dared use that elevator anymore. But you can't kill curiosity. Students wanted to know what would happen if someone used that elevator, but they didn't want to be the one to do it. After several years, things got better in the country, and foreign exchange student programs began to develop. Enter a new foreign student who had only just come to Thailand and has no idea about its history as of yet. She was a girl from Japan, fresh-faced, and excited about her first time being abroad. She made good friends and eventually started dating local guys. One of the guys, being mischievous, had suggested that they go walk around the university campus late in the evening. He intentionally walked in the direction that would lead them to the elevator. He had convinced the girl to hang out on the roofs of the university building and casually proceeded towards the red elevator. The elevator door creaks open and they both step inside. But as the doors begin to close, the boy jumps out and says he'll race her to the top by using the stairs. The last thing he sees as the door closes is the Japanese girl giving a stereotypical Asian giggle and waving bye to him. As the boy raced to the top floor by stairs, he knew there was no way he would beat her in the elevator, but he hurried as fast as he could anyways. He really wanted to know what she would experience if she does experience anything, that is. He reached the top floor and was surprised not to see her waiting outside the elevator for him. He walked towards the red door of the elevator, checking to see what floor it is on. He notices the elevator says 3, but it is no longer moving. He looks around to make sure that his new foreign girlfriend is nowhere to be found. He knew he had to press the call elevator button, his hands trembling as he does. The red elevator reaches the top floor, and the doors open. He sees the young Japanese girl sitting down, with her head pressed to her knees, and she was muttering something he couldn't make out. He calls her name softly, but she doesn't respond. He tries a little louder, with his hand still on the call elevator button, to keep the doors open. No response. He tries a third time, again louder to make sure she hears him without a doubt. The girl lifts her head, her eyes and facial expression completely blank, and just repeatedly muttering, "Down with the dictatorship" in Thai. He didn't think she knew Thai that well. He is unable to lock eyes with her, as she is in a state of total shock, so he leans forward to tap her with his other hand. As soon as his skin makes contact with hers, she looks straight at him and this time yells, "Down with the dictatorship," as she jumps up and sprints past him, through the door to roof, and jumps straight off. No one really knows what happened to the boy. Some say he went to jail because no one believed his story and that he must have pushed her off. The media doesn't really cover the story either, because it seemed like your everyday, ordinary murder case. That red elevator is still there, and no student dares to use it till this day. 8th story. My hometown had an urban legend. I've met him. Grandma, why can't we ever go in the woods? I was 6 years old when I asked that question. My parents had always told me to stay away from the woods, and whenever I asked them why, they always avoided the question. I was curious. My grandmother turned to look at me. Even at such a young age, I realized the expression on her face was somehow off. Well, because of the man in white, she noticed my confused expression. "Your parents have never told you about him?" I shook my head. "You see, he's kind of like a demon. He's very beautiful, and he uses that beauty to lure you further and further into the woods. But when you're really deep in the woods, he shows you just how ugly he truly is. And then he kills you." "W, what does he look like?" "From what I remember, he looks just like a regular man. He's a bit short. He has short black hair and pale skin. What if I go in the woods and run away as soon as I see him?" "You can't. He's so beautiful that you can't help but follow him." I was getting frightened at this point. She must have noticed that because she smiled and changed the subject. It has been 20 years since that conversation, yet I still can't stop thinking about it. I hate to admit it, but it still scares me a little. Maybe it was the way my grandmother seemed so frightened, so vulnerable as she was saying it. I had never seen her like that before. But no matter how much it scared me, it was nothing more than an urban legend. That's what I thought. Recently, I decided to visit my hometown. On my last day there, I decided to explore the woods. I had always wanted to, and I wasn't going to be stopped by an urban legend. I had been wandering around the woods for about 15 minutes, admiring the beautiful scenery, when I saw him. He was stunning, skin white as snow, which matched his clothes. Silky black hair, contrasting his overall pale appearance. Words aren't enough to describe his beauty. The mere sight of him made my lips curl upward. Suddenly, he turned around to face me. "Oh, hello," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. His voice was so calm, so peaceful that it put me at ease. His pale face seemed to redden slightly. I felt as if my cheeks were on fire. I smiled at him. He smiled back. Oh God, that smile. So beautiful, coy, yet inviting. It feels bittersweet to think about it now. Would you like to come with me?" "Where?" To my home." The shade of red on my cheeks seemed to deepen. "Okay, sure." He gently touched my hand, which almost made me swoon. Do you mind if I—" "Not at all." Our fingers intertwined, and we started to walk through the forest. As we talked, I noticed the forest became more and more beautiful. The trees seemed to become taller, and the leaves thicker. It was mesmerizing. We walked for what seemed like hours, but I didn't mind. Everything around me was so beautiful that every second with them seemed like heaven. Plus, the destination would be worth it. We finally arrived at a small wooden cabin. "We're here," he said, opening the door. It was rustic but charming. I entered, closing the door behind me. He looked deep into my eyes and brought his hands up to his face. He began clawing at it frantically. It was bleeding, yet he didn't seem to care. He just kept scratching. "Are you okay?" He ignored me as he peeled his skin. I took a step back. He peeled his skin off completely, revealing gurgling, thick black sludge, as hideous as he was beautiful. It crept towards me. I frantically tried to open the door, but it seemed to be locked. It crept closer. I jumped out of the window. Glass pierced my whole body. I was in so much pain, but I had to get away from it. I ran as fast as I could. I was slow considering my injuries. Every day I thank God that it was slower. I don't know how I did it, but I somehow managed to escape the vast woods and get myself to a hospital. I didn't tell the doctors how it happened. They wouldn't believe me. I left the town that day. I never came back. I have only one thing to say to whoever is reading this. Look out for the man in white. Ninth story. An urban legend came true. When I was studying in England, I was at a university in Manchester. Like nearly all of the student accommodation available, the house me and my 5 friends rented was in a rather undesirable area, cheap, and was, well, not the nicest of houses, cheap. Manchester is an awesome city, but like all cities, you have got to be careful where you are and who you interact with at night. It was a standard Saturday night in November. Me and the lads drank a stupid amount of beer before heading out to a club for a night of borderline illegal debauchery. We had tickets for the event that night, some DJs were playing, and it was set to be a belter. When I say set to be a belter, it means we had all had a shitload of booze even before we left the house, such as the culture of the binge drinking student. We have all been there. 10 p.m. rolled round, and we got sorted and left the house. We left the upstairs landing light on, standard. Everyone hates getting home drunk and stumbling around in the dark trying to find the light switch. We decided to walk to the club. It was only 20 minutes walk away, and we didn't want to get a taxi. Plus, we were smashed. Who cares about a brisk walk? We got halfway when I realized that I had left my goddamn entry ticket on the kitchen counter. Don't worry, guys. I will jog it back now and meet you in the queue for the club, I exclaimed and started running back to our house. 5 minutes later, I was standing at the front door. The last one out had left the fucking door open. I severely cussed at him under my breath. We are living in a rough part of Manchester, and leaving the door open is such a schoolboy bitch mistake to make. I had my Alienware computer upstairs and everything. I was going to tell him straight once I had gotten to the club. So I went in and thought I saw a shadow move across the landing upstairs, silent as a ninja and just as disconcerting. Fuck it, I was drunk. It was nothing. I was paranoid. I knew exactly where my ticket was, so ran into the kitchen, grabbed my ticket, and ran back out, making sure to lock the door behind me. I jogged back to the club, met my friends in the queue, and boom, a raucous night out was had. We all left together when the lights came on about 5 o'clock a.m. We were all sorts of inebriated. Mooching home, I remember that my dick housemate had left the door open. I incoherently told him the error of his ways, and we had a bit of laugh about it. That is until we got to the house and saw that the fucking door was off its hinges. We exchanged looks in a fuck this, we don't need this right about now way. After some deliberation and a phone call to the police, we decided to man up and take a look inside. After all, we were 6 male adults, we frequented the gym, and a couple of my housemates were kickboxers. The alcohol gave us the courage we needed, though, I am sure. Entering carefully, we started switching on the lights, room by room. We didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. There was no movement upstairs, but my God, it was tense. The house was clear. No one was there that shouldn't have been. The police came, and very little was done about a house full of students getting robbed. Happens all the time, right? Wrong. This shit does not happen all the time. My housemate came through into the hallway where we were gathered, white as a ghost, with a knife and a piece of paper in his hand. He had found the note stuck into the plasterboard wall, separating the kitchen from the lounge, the knife pinning it to the wall. All it said was, "I bet you were glad you didn't turn the lights on." There had been people in our house when I grabbed my ticket. There had been someone upstairs and someone in the kitchen when I ran in earlier that night. Those people were very real, and one of them was very much holding a blade. I am so glad it was pitch black. 10th story. Urban legends. Growing up in Sparrow Creek, there was little else to do than count the days until we'd finally be old enough to ditch the place. I guess that's why urban legends became as big as they did in my small hometown. It became a weekend tradition for the teenagers of Sparrow Creek to sneak out past curfew and meet up by the creek to start a big bonfire, all while passing around urban legends. Being only 12 when this fad was born, I was too young to join in their escapades, but was too old to bide my time playing house with the little kids on my street. My older brother, Kurt, was 15 at the time, and was one of the lucky kids who got to experience the bonfire. I remember one time I caught him sneaking back in. I guess he had probably thought that I was already tucked into bed, but I had actually been up waiting for him. I had always wanted to join one of these bonfires, but Kurt had responded with "You're too young" every time I asked. I figured that maybe, just maybe, if I was able to catch him coming back, that he would bring me with next time. And guess what? It worked. The following Saturday, Kurt and I pretended to go to bed at curfew and waited silently for our parents to retire for the night. Once he was sure that we wouldn't be caught, Kurt crept into my room and had me follow him out to the living room. I kept watch as Kurt quietly pried open the window and crawled out. When he was outside, he called in for me to hurry up. This was the moment I had been waiting for forever, yet I hesitated. I was never one to be scared of the dark or the monsters that hid in it, but something about the inky black sky mixed with my inability to hear even an animal was too much for me. "Hurry up, dweeb, or I'm leaving." Kurt had threatened me. I made my decision quickly. I knew I might not have had the chance to do this ever again, so I slipped out the window. Kurt clicked on a heavy industrial flashlight and swung the beam of light to the woods by our backyard. A shiver went down my spine when I figured out that he meant we would have to go through the woods. I had always been warned that nothing good could come out of going in there, and I wasn't about to test my luck. "Hey, Kurt, I don't think we should go this way." I tried to convince him that we'd be better off taking the road, but he wouldn't hear it. "Shut up, Mandy. Don't be dumb. If we took the road, we wouldn't make it in time," my brother said, already beginning to walk through the woods. I reluctantly followed. I knew that while the creek was by one of the main roads, if we cut across the woods, we might have even been able to beat everyone else there. As we walked, my fear only grew. Every little snap of a twig made me jump. I thought I was seeing things that weren't really there. However, seeing Kurt's calm form helped me march through. By the time we reached the fire site, I was so jumpy that I didn't know if I'd be able to sit through an entire hour or two of listening to scary stories. Kurt and I walked over to a log that we would use to sit on, and we began setting our stuff down when I heard a loud snap behind me. I felt my breath catch in my throat and wheeled around only to end up pointing the beam of my flashlight into Kyle's eye. Kyle was my brother's best friend, and he was just as mean as Kurt. I knew they would both be trying to scare the living hell out of me that night, and the fact that I just temporarily blinded him probably wasn't going to help my case. "Watch it, loser!" Kyle shouted and knocked my flashlight out of my hand. I watched in terror as the light broke, and my brother and Kyle just laughed. "Why did you bring your sister, dude?" Kyle asked Kurt. He sighed and punched my arm. "She caught me coming back home last weekend and threatened to tell our mom if I didn't bring her with." He explained this to Kyle, and both glared at me. "Listen, dork, if you screw this night up, they'll never find you all the way out here. Understand?" Kurt asked. I gulped and nodded my head, going to sit on our log. Before long, more and more of Kurt's friends began to trickle in. Once everyone was there and settled, the ritual began. It started with a story about a little girl that was consumed by a haunted forest and became progressively more scary. The story I remember the most is the one that directly impacted me. The laughter and joy slowly subsided as Stephanie Adams cleared her throat to begin her tale. Stephanie had always been known as a master narrator, and she had surprisingly very realistic-sounding stories. Okay, everyone. All your stories have been good so far, but have they been true? Because mine is, and I guarantee it'll make you all run home screaming," Stephanie announced. I tensed and grabbed Kurt's arm, but he just laughed and pushed me away, not taking his eyes off of Stephanie. When she had everyone's attention, Stephanie proceeded to tell a story about a homicidal maniac that had made his way into our town. According to her, he laid in wait in dark places, much like our forest, for teens and little kids who were by themselves. He was known for his signature of faking an owl call. This made me uneasy because there happened to be lots of owls indigenous to our woods. I asked Stephanie what would happen to you if he caught you, and she replied that he would kill you, and the only way you'd be found is if someone stumbled across your bones. According to her, the man would bury his victims in the forests he stalked, taking a lock of hair with him as a souvenir. Needless to say, I was pissing myself with fright. I begged Kurt for 20 minutes straight to go home, to not stay in the woods with the crazy man. Kurt got pissed at me for making his friends laugh at him, for having a wimpy sister, he said, but agreed to take me home anyway. On our walk back home, I heard a singular owl call off in the distance and let out a small squeak. Kurt chastised me for being a wimp and told me it was just a real owl. When we got home, Kurt sent me back in through the window, yet didn't follow me. Aren't you coming? I asked him. Kurt scoffed at me. And what, have my friends think I'm a wimp too? No thank you. I'm going to go back and have a good time. Later, loser, he said, turning to leave. I called out in alarm. Kurt, please don't go. I have a bad feeling. Besides, if you go back, I'll tell Mom you've been sneaking out and try to scare me by making me come with. I taunted him. Kurt was angry, I could tell, but not angry enough to risk being caught. He came back inside, and we went to bed. The next morning, we got the phone call. Kyle and the others' bodies were stumbled upon by a jogger, and each were missing a lock of hair. Kyle was the first to be found. Then everyone else was discovered within a close range to him. Well, everyone but Stephanie. And looking back on it now, Stephanie always did the best bird calls. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.